After a season filled with wild upsets, surprise teams, and massive turns, we have finally found out who's going to be in the college football playoff this season. Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State are the top four. This has been an insane season filled with unpredictability and, quite honestly, one of the most unpredictable seasons that I can remember as we look forward to this college football playoff. I mean, last season, I think we all kind of knew Georgia was going to be potentially the team to win the college football playoff. We all kind of knew that Georgia was the most dominant team all season. And even if you look back to 2020, we all kind of knew that it was Alabama who was the most dominant team in the country heading into the college football playoff. And you could say the same with LSU of 2019. But looking at 2022, who is that team this season? Really, there's no answer to that question. You got Georgia and Michigan, who are the top two, the clear top two. Both teams have been the most dominant teams in the country all season, the only two undefeated teams remaining. You obviously got TCU, who's been the big surprise team of the season. I don't think anybody expected TCU to be this good. I mean, they're 12-1. I mean, they were undefeated in the regular season. And that was a team that, I mean, many didn't expect them to even get past 6 to 7 wins this season. And here we are. TCU is the 3 seed in the college football playoff. And then you got Ohio State sneaking into the top 4. Obviously, a team that just lost to Michigan, and there was arguments that they shouldn't be in the top 4, but with the upsets that occurred in the conference championships, they have snuck in to that number 4 position. This is a college football playoff just filled with just outstanding storylines. You got Georgia and Michigan, your two massive, your big name conference champions. You got TCU, who's the big surprise team. Ohio State, who in the preseason was one of the teams that was widely favored as the potential future national champion. And I mean, you look at number 5, Alabama's right there. Alabama was the clear favorite to win the national title heading into this 2022 season. They took a couple of close, brutal losses in the regular season to Tennessee and then to LSU, which have kept them out of the college football playoff, and quite honestly, as it should be. I think Alabama's an outstanding football team. I think they're very talented, and if you put them in the college football playoff, could they potentially win it all? I do think so, but when you take 2 losses in the regular season and you're comparing them up against, say, Ohio State, who had 1 loss, TCU, who lost in the conference championship, I think that the committee got it right and that Alabama shouldn't have been in the top 4. And then you got Tennessee at number 6. Tennessee's been one of the big name teams of the season as well. Maybe you could say a surprise team. I do think Tennessee, I expected Tennessee to be good this season. I don't know about this good, but I mean, TCU in particular, I don't think anybody really expected, maybe a couple of TCU fans, but I don't think many expected at all the Horned Frogs to be in this position. But here we are. I believe that they're the second Big 12 team to ever make the college football playoff. Oklahoma's made it a couple of times, but TCU is now the next team in the Big 12 to have done that, and they're taking on Michigan in what is going to be the Fiesta Bowl. So that's going to be obviously an outstanding matchup there, and then Georgia against Ohio State. That's going to be a really intriguing matchup. Quite honestly, I think Ohio State, you give them an opportunity to play against Georgia, they're obviously going to put up a fight. And, who knows? The Buckeyes could potentially make it to the national championship. That is within reason, I really do think, even though C.J. Stroud, that team, they obviously kind of fell apart in the second half against Michigan. But we'll see if they can redeem themselves as they take on an outstanding Georgia team. And, yeah, once again, I think the committee got it right here. This is kind of my reaction, and I'll be talking about as well who I think could potentially win the semifinals. You look at Georgia and Ohio State. You got Georgia, who's had an outstanding defense all season. Obviously, they allowed a lot of points and a lot of yards against LSU yesterday in the SEC title game. That does concern me just a little bit. Their defense hasn't been quite as dominant as it was last season, even though their offense has shown a greater potential, I would say. Their offense was just balling out yesterday. They were scoring, and they had over 50 points. So against an LSU defense that's been generally good this season. So, for Georgia, I do think that they are deserving of being number 1. Ohio State, C.J. Stroud, that is a very talented football team, and I wouldn't be sleeping on Ohio State one bit. And quite honestly, if I'm Georgia or Michigan, and I'm playing either TCU or Ohio State, I think I'm taking nothing away from TCU. I think TCU is an outstanding football team, but I would rather play TCU at this current point than Ohio State. TCU coming off of a loss in the conference championship game. They finally took a loss, and obviously Ohio State's coming off of a loss going into the college football playoff as well, going into this into this bowl season. But TCU is a team where they've had a lot more. They've had a tougher schedule, and they've had, I mean, if you look at the stats, they have had a tougher strength of schedule than I think any of the teams in the top four, surprisingly enough. They've played a lot of ranked teams this season, but a lot of those games have been very close for TCU, and their best win, you could say, was against Texas on the road just a few weeks ago. So, I mean, TCU's had a lot of close games. They've escaped losses multiple times, and they've just been on the fortunate side of a lot of close games. And once again, I'm taking nothing away from TCU. I think they are a team that they've found a way to win every single week, and for that reason, they are deserving of being in the college football playoff because they've won each of those games except for the Kansas State game yesterday. Kansas State beat them in overtime. But, I mean, TCU is a team that if you followed my channel, I have been a bit uncertain about them, especially in the middle parts of the season when TCU really started to rise in the rankings. In particular, this was really after they beat Oklahoma and blew them out. And, I mean, TCU is, I mean, I've been uncertain about them, but after watching them against Kansas State, that team put Max Duggan, they put everything out on the line. Max Duggan has played just outstanding on the stretch. And once again, I'll say this again. Max Duggan, seeing how much he's improved with TCU. I mean, if you look back to his freshman year, he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the Power Five. I mean, he just was not a good quarterback. And the way that he's improved is outstanding, to say the least. And I mean, this is a huge opportunity for him to prove himself as he goes up against Michigan, who I potentially think is the hottest team in the playoff. I mean, Georgia's also undefeated, but Michigan coming off of an Ohio State win, obviously over their huge rival there, a team that they were hardly able to beat before the past couple of years. And I mean, this is a huge opportunity for TCU to go up against what is an outstanding team in Michigan, and Michigan's really just come around the past couple of years. I mean, you look back to 2020 when Michigan, I mean, people were calling for Jim Harbaugh to be fired. They were saying Jim Harbaugh should be fired, but here we are. Michigan, the past couple of seasons, has made the college football playoff, won the Big Ten 2 straight seasons, and this could be Michigan's year to win the national championship. I mean, obviously, I will say this about the national title: I think it's either going to be Georgia or Michigan. I'll just say that outright. I think Georgia ends up beating Ohio State, even though that game is going to be, I mean, sometimes you'll see in the 1 versus 4 games in the college football playoff, the 1 seed usually dominates. I mean, example last season when Alabama dominated Cincinnati. But this season, I think Ohio State really is going to be able to keep it close against Georgia. I do think that's a game where it could come down to the very end. In the end, I think Georgia wins it, but that's kind of a dangerous game for Georgia there. And if you remember back to when Ohio State won the college football playoff back in the first ever college football playoff, I think it was in 2014, the 2014 season. Ohio State was the 4 seed. They were the 4 seed in that playoff, and they went and they won the college football playoff. And I could see that happening this season as well. I mean, Ohio State is talented enough. And I'll get into, obviously, with time, I'll give you guys my official predictions for the college football playoff semifinals. But as of right now, honestly, it's kind of a coin toss between Georgia and Ohio State, the more I think about it. But for Michigan and TCU, I do want to favor Michigan. I do favor Michigan in that matchup. I think TCU puts up a fight. I just don't know if they can beat Michigan. I think Ohio State can beat Georgia just with the talent that they've got. But I do think that Michigan, I do want to favor against TCU at this current point. The Wolverines, I think they are a clean team right now, the way that they're playing, the way they played against Purdue in the second half. The second half, I mean, that is a second half team, the way that they're playing. So I do want to favor Michigan right now over TCU, but that Georgia-Ohio State matchup could come down to the very end, and potentially, I mean, either way, it's a win-win. If Michigan wins against TCU, they're either facing off against Georgia, the team that they played last year in the semifinals where Georgia won, or they're playing Ohio State again, which is obviously one of the greatest rivalries in all of sports, quite honestly. And Michigan and Ohio State, Michigan beat them the past couple times, but Ohio State has got a chance for a national title if that were to be the case. But that said, that's going to wrap it up for today. Let me know your thoughts on this top 4 in the comments below. I'll be giving more analysis as time goes on, but I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.